I'm going to talk about field maps and how to utilize this program in a wilderness application for those who haven't done it. So first off, field maps is just a latest version of an application previously referred to as ArcGIS Online. That's right now we're transitioning between two different applications. AGOL, ArcGIS Online, was an app that is now turning into field maps and is, I think, still going to be active through the end of the year. Field maps just being a latest iteration of that with a bit more capacity and capability. There's also a USDA internal app called S1. I believe BLM and some other agencies also use S1, and that's essentially a very similar platform, except that the agencies themselves have professionals that run those platforms, those apps, and can make some of the background design and everything tailor fit to how the agencies use it. But at the end of the day, these digital spatial map applications feed into GIS programs and databases that can all talk to one another. So you can theoretically use different mobile apps on a mobile device and have it feed into the same database and synchronize. So that's essentially what these are. Is in the past, up until recently, the capability to use field maps and some of these other applications, a lot of our data was collected by hand using map and compass, shooting azimuths, and collecting a lot of that data in paper format and binders, which we have quite a bit of here at the Willamette. And it transitioned into maybe integrating a GPS unit like a Garmin, and then from there into a Juno format, which was kind of a precursor to field maps, ArcGIS Online, and S1. And now we have the capability to use some of these. And just recently, we also came out within the Forest Service to be able to share and utilize these maps with some of our partner groups, so folks can sign up and get accounts. So if you have questions about signing up and utilizing this, I might save some of that for the end. But know that basically there's an online sign up form that would go through your local GIS specialist program, and yourself within the agency or partner groups that are working with agencies can all sign up. The partner would just have to be sponsored by an agency representative at this time. And I think that just became available this year. So with that to start, you can really build out this spatial mapping program however you'd like. It's really customizable. So I'll zoom out here real quick and show you kind of a larger perspective and view. Eric mentioned that on the McKenzie River Ranger District, we manage the west side of the Three Sisters and Mount Washington wilderness areas. And that's what you're seeing part of right now. But our group is actually collaborating, our district is collaborating on a more forest-wide and bi-forest effort between the Willamette and the Deschutes to manage wilderness more holistically across the boundaries. So our program, this spatial model, applies all the way from Mount Jefferson to the north to Diamond Peak to the south, encompassing roughly 9 wilderness areas in total. So depending on how you want to apply it, you can make it larger or smaller. But essentially, we just started making a base map that you can see here. The base map for us is just a topographic map underneath that shows a lot of the same features like lakes and trails and topo lines and peaks and glaciers and streams that you might see on one of your local area forest or district maps, because we wanted to make it as easy and transferable between a hard copy that you'd have on your person and a mobile version like this that you could utilize on your phone or on desktop, which is what I'm showing you now. But then you start adding features to it. So one feature that you're looking at, kind of where my cursor is pointing, is the wilderness boundary. So you have the wilderness boundary show up. You can make that whatever color you'd like to make it, however dark or light you'd want it to be. And then some of the other features that you're looking at are listed over here on the left in the legend. So I'll go through some of those right now and give you an idea of how we've built some of this. So there's a lot of different reasons for utilizing a program like this. You don't have to build it this way. I'll say that again. But just to give you a sense of some of the things that we've looked at, and I know other folks have done quite different builds, and I'll touch on that as well. But we've put down like action items. So instead of trying to remember that there's a trash cache behind that mossy rock next to the lake in some obscure area and pass that on between some of our folks who go into the field, you can put down a star on this map, put in some features to the star to give a person a description as to what needs to be followed up on there. And essentially, when you zoom in on one of these stars, I'll just do it right now. Here's a red one. And you click on it, it has the ability, whoops, excuse me, to bring up some of that featured data. And you can see, oh, it looked like it was created by me. It's still unresolved, has a low priority. So all of these data fields in the feature, that is the action item, are customizable too. And they have some limits on what you can do. There's the ability to set dates, drop down menus, add in text. A lot of it very similar to like a Microsoft Excel or another spreadsheet format. But you can put anything you want in there. In this case, we had a lot of area for just throwing comments in, so you can give a rich description of what's going on and what might need to be addressed, things that people might need to bring to address what's going on. You found a big trash cache that might need to be hauled out by stock. You could give an example of, or in a description of how many pounds, how many animals you think it might take. If there's some obscure shaped things in there that you might need to bring, like some large hammer or something like that in to break down into smaller pieces to be able to haul it out. A lot easier to be able to put this on a format like this that people can see, have a GPS point and go directly to with a description, rather than phone calling or talking with folks and having them try and remember it or write it all down. You can just ping it and go. So in this case too, we have the ability, I'll go to the top here where it says unresolved. We have the ability to tie some of the data fields within this feature to how the feature shows on the map. So you can see over here on the left, we have in progress, resolved and unresolved. It has 3 different categories. And when you go in and edit this feature, click this little edit button right here. When you change that, it's going to change how that star shows on the map as a red with a yellow halo around it saying unresolved, kind of drawing your attention to it. The yellow saying, hey, it's in progress, we got somebody on this, and then resolved being green, to kind of give people an idea of what they might need to focus on and not focus on. Some other features we have here are, I'm just pointing right now at one of the red squares. Let me zoom up over here. These are our trailheads on our district maps. The trailheads themselves are red squares on the map, so we thought we'd just create consistent symbology, and we can have all of our features for our trailheads built into this program. We haven't quite got it to the point where all of our data is on there, but we're working on building that out. Anything from, is what kind of signage is going to go on that trailhead, what it's made out of, maintenance it might need, those sorts of things can be updated and shared with differing folks who are going to be going and working in that area. You'll see some trail items in here that we're actually going to separate out and make into a new map, because maps can get a little bit cluttered and a little bit too busy with multiple types of data sets. So if you're thinking about doing this, you really want to consider how much data is on there and how busy your map is getting, and whether or not it'd be a good idea to instead split some of the data out into multiple maps. So an advantage of having a lot of data on one map is that it's all in one place and you can access it and see it all at one time. And I'll give you an example of that advantage as I zoom into Linton Lake here. So at Linton Lake, you can see a lot of our social trails, which are the blue dotted lines. You can see some of our campsites in that area. And if we had any action items going on there, you could also see those all real time and spatially. And this not only helps folks in the field get a concept of where they may need to focus some of their time and attention while they're working on the ground and looking at this on a phone or a tablet, but also if we were to talk with somebody who hasn't gone into the field as much, maybe someone who's like a recreation staff officer at the supervisor's office level that just doesn't have as much time as our field staff to get out there, you can paint them a really good picture by maybe taking a snapshot of this or just virtually walking them through it like I'm doing with you right now and give a sense of some of the impact that's going on there out there on the ground. So having all this together allows you to see it all at the same time. And if it's starting to get too cluttered, you can go over here to contents and you can switch these and toggle some of these features on and off so that they still exist in the background, but they may not show the social trails at that time. So you can just focus in on what you want to talk about and look at. That functionality is available on both the mobile and the desktop versions of this. So, but sometimes people just want to focus on the features that they have. Maybe they're not as familiar with the formatting and programming. It takes some time to train people how to use this, especially some partners that just want to be able to collect one type of feature data. Let's say it's a trail logged out and just show what they did for log out completion on a trail. That may be a good reason to just separate out and make a new map for just that feature, or maybe just what that partner group's working on so they can access it and deal with that and not have a lot of the other data kind of cluttering up and confusing what they're looking at on the map. And also, if you have a lot of sensitive data on the map that people might dig into and start editing on accident, separating out maps could kind of help protect that and keep that data more secure. You can also set up any of these maps to be a read-only version. So if you want folks just to have access to look at it, but not edit or manipulate the features, a read-only version can easily be made. So I'll just stop right there real quick and see if folks have questions on what I presented so far.
Yeah, Dylan, a question in the chat from Nathan is that he's a student sort of getting into GIS, and he's wondering if there's a program that is used by most federal agencies.
So field maps and AGOL, I kind of talk about them as one app because we're just in a transition period. Both that and S1 are used by, I know at least the Forest Service and the BLM. And it doesn't really matter which one that you pick, as long as you kind of stick with that one and use whatever profile name you're given and one only. If you start to split and use it on both different apps on different devices, you can, I haven't really gotten to the part about synchronizing, but when you hit the synchronize button on this, it will push the data you've collected in an offline version to the database, and it will pull any of the changes from the database to your offline version. If you have it in your account on multiple different devices and different programs, it will screw with that, and you just won't be able to, you'll have to manually extract some of the data. So I'd say pick whatever one works best for you. In my experience, so far, we've tried Android platform tablets and we've tried iPhone applications. And the iPhone has tended to work better and have less errors with collector and field maps. And Android has tended to work better for us with S1. But I would say you could try both out and play with it until you settle on something that you like. And I haven't, because field maps is new, I haven't really been able to test that for very long to see if it has the same errors on Android as it had in the past.
Yeah, and then a follow-up question there, Dylan. Sort of trying to get your sense for what this is going to look like going into the future. Will field maps replace the use of Avenza maps in the field?
It's a good question. It seems like, so Avenza Maps doesn't have as good a capacity to share the information as Field Maps. One main advantage that Field Maps has is that synchronized button. So when you get a field map and you've been invited to the group, you basically download an offline version onto your mobile map. And you can use it online if you're going to be connected with the internet in the field, but the minute you lose that internet connection, you've lost that map. So essentially download an offline map. You're working with that. When you get back to service, you hit the synchronize button. It pushes your data out and takes whatever anybody else has collected to yours. Avenza is harder to share that information that way in such a streamlined capacity. So what really pushed the usage of maps like these in our agency was fire operations and a lot of NEPA and planning projects. So a lot of folks are switching to utilizing this for a lot of those purposes, especially fire, as using field maps and AGOL. So I would say, yeah, the agency is using this with maybe Avenza using as a backup. And one big difference between field maps and Avenza that I would say Avenza can still help paint a picture with is you can take photos in field maps and attach it to a point. But if you start getting a lot of data and a lot of photos, you start having synchronizing errors because there's so much data to push and pull. You can help with that by basically toggling a button within the app that'll allow you to just push the data out and then separately do a pull, which can get you better success with synchronizing. But once the data with the photos gets big, it just doesn't work as well. And that functionality has been troublesome. So Avenza Maps can help maybe tie a photo to a point and still paint that picture, but it would be separate from this app. Okay, I'll move on and try and keep some more time for Q&A at the end. I'll go over, I talked about some, but I'll go over some more of the benefits. So having the data all in one place is kind of a new thing to be able to do. I'd say it's one major benefit of this, is you can look at everything spatially all at once if you choose to do so. And even data, so you can see how much data I have in the legend here for this particular application, campsite inventory, closed for rehab areas, all of our signs are labeled out. All our social trails are in place. Our action items are on there. Even if you had some of those data fields and you wanted some, but not all on a different map, you can do that. And then when those folks synchronize on that separate map, it still goes back to that same database where those features exist. So you can kind of move some of the features across different map platforms if you wanted to have all that still talk to each other. So data can be modified all at once rather than piecemeal. A lot of the systems are easily replicable. So let's say you saw something on this map that you thought you might want to bring over to your unit. It would be a simple call to our GIS specialist and say, hey, I like how X, Y, and Z is set up. I might want to modify it a little bit. Can you just make me a template-based map based off of the features that are here? And then we'll work off of that rather than starting from ground zero. That's easy to do. And then like I talked about before, since fire and a lot of NEPA planning and other folks are moving over to field maps in S1, there's a lot of consistency with being able to utilize these programs and know how they function with the rest of how the agency is operating. So the drawbacks, though, it does take some time to become familiar with the interface. So there's some training, some time for folks to sit down with mobile devices and go over how to use it and make sure everybody's calibrated on how to use it before they start editing features. I'd say the same is true with a lot of other ways to collect data, hard copy data, or even GPSs and whatnot. But this just takes some time, and like I said, getting the accounts, getting invited to the group, downloading the map, having that internet access. All take some time and some capability. It's not going to be possible to really do this unless you have a dedicated GIS specialist who's able and willing to do it. So in this area, we have that. Her name's Rachel Armstrong, and we have some other folks locally who might be picking this map up and running with that. But you may or may not have folks with available time and capacity to be able to do this. So you might have to investigate that a bit. And another major drawback is mid-season map changes. So once you have a lot of the features that you think that you want, and you're starting to collect data throughout the year, and you go, oh, dang it, it'd really be great if Campsites was collecting this feature, or it'd be a checkbox for this, or a drop down for that. If you have a bunch of folks working in this map and collecting all the data at the same time, to change the feature data or the background map essentially would require everybody to stop collecting, everybody synchronize so that no data is lost, and then the GIS specialist would change some of those features based on what you said, and that may be very fast or maybe slow. When they're done, you would have to delete the old map that you had loaded onto your mobile device, download a new offline map, and start over again. And if you don't do that, if you haven't synchronized beforehand, and the map changes are made, and you go onto the new map, the old data that you had will be stored on your mobile device. You'll have to manually extract it, which can be troublesome and cumbersome, especially if it's complex data. So it's worth thinking about setting a lot of this, the feature data up early in the year, like we've done here, and getting to a version that you can live with for that year if you're going to have a lot of folks involved in using it. But that is one of the drawback to take note of. So some common errors I'd go over. I already talked about the one account on multiple devices. Folks not setting up like track intervals. So basically you're creating dots or lines, and lines are just a collection of dots. So a line is also referred to as a track. When you're tracking, if you have really broad track intervals, let's say 600 or 700 feet track intervals, you're not going to get the detail that you want sometimes, especially with like a social trail as to where it necessarily is. Folks will start collecting the data without having set that, and you're not maybe getting the detail that you're after. So it's important to set that up ahead of time and just look at all the different capacities and features that the program has, and make sure that you set it up the way you want with everybody who's going to use it right out the gate. And it's going to be really important, I'll emphasize again, to field test whatever it is you have. So get a version that you have folks download an offline version, and give yourself time to do a field test and work out some of the kinks and see how it's going to apply to your situation. And you'll probably, as I have, come up with a lot of other ideas and ways that you could use it. So your specialist can go in and change some of that background feature data early, so that mid-season you're not making those changes. I mentioned Android in the past has tended to have more errors with field maps and AGOL, and that Apple is, I don't think you can even use S1 on Apple, I believe. So we talked about too much data being on one map and splitting that out. And then one more common error I mentioned is that it's good to synchronize, establish a time that you're going to hit the sync button with folks, because if you're going out and you collect data and come back and hit sync, and you're going to need a certain data set that somebody else is grabbing in order to do your work, let's say next week, you want to make sure that they will have synchronized before you hit that button in order to make sure that you're going to the field with that correct data. What we've established here is simply when you get back, hit the button right before you go out again, get to an internet source and hit the synchronize button again, and you'll have everything that's available at that time. And then once you're in the field in the offline version, you got what you got. You may not be able to see it real time unless, like I said, you're able to work with this and have full connectivity to internet the whole time. Then you can see real-time changes as you work through. So I'll finish up by showing you some of the features that we have and a little bit of why we chose those features, see if anything might apply to your program. Then I'll save the rest for questions. So you saw the action items piece. The trails one we're going to be testing out this year. That's going to go to a separate map. The idea behind the trails was to work with, we have hundreds of partners helping us with our trails maintenance. And so it's always been a challenge to communicate about who's been where, doing what, and have folks avoid showing up to a trailhead, planning to do work, and then it's already been done by somebody. So we're going to have a separate map that we're trialing this year that'll have a red track line that would overlay onto a system trail for scouting that trail. Within that scouted line, you'd be able to click on it and see any notes that they had about the scout. There's 50 logs between, the trailhead and the point that the end point that I had. I would estimate roughly 3 days to do this section. So you can change that scout into an assignment. So let's say one of our crews, we have a lot of different crews, scorpions and salamanders and so on and so forth, who would, say, we'll go and get that done. And that for us as the agency folks who are also going and getting trails maintained know, okay, if we have folks set up to do this within the next 3 weeks, we'll go and focus our time elsewhere. So we'll go ahead on the map and assign out some of the trail work that they might be doing. At this time, we only have like log out and brush out to be assigned as a line. And then when they've completed, you can just take a drop down within that feature or just make a new feature if you'd like. And then say the purple would show that it's been brushed out, green would say that it's been logged out. And we can track the progress of what we're doing throughout the year so that we're not going into areas and duplicating efforts. Folks can go directly to where the need is. Again, you see the social trails here. Recently, so in the past, we've done social trail monitoring for our wilderness areas as part of wilderness stewardship performance. Some of these social trails are starting to close for rehabilitation in areas. So you can toggle that from just a social trail to a red dotted line showing that it's closed for rehab, and we'll know to go in there and check and see on how that's going. If people remove some of the small signs wooden signs that we put out there, designating this as a closed route, we can reinstall some of those. We can recover the trail and try and do work if people are starting to reuse that, or show notes that people are still using social trails and going around and creating more, which would alert us to take different action. We started out with our protocol, all the tiny little spur trails off of social trails as being points, which turn to these pluses. I'd really discourage you from doing the points. We're going to turn all those to just lines. It's a lot easier to manage as a line and look at on a map rather than having points and lines. So we'll be switching that up. You can see all the different sign categories that we have designated: boundary signs, junction signs, trailheads, some of our small closed for rehab signs that stay out there. One of the options we also put was closed to camping, so an area that folks can still use but not camp at, so on and so forth. So some of these are getting changed up. We have some modifications going on right now, but it gives you an idea of some of the different sign categories you could do. And you can see we just kept the shapes all the same. We just changed the color to indicate what kind of sign that it is. Closed for rehab sites, so it could be a campsite, it could be a day use site, and social trail. Again, this is going to be changed. Some of the wording got messed up when we made the last feature, so the social trail will go away. It'll mainly be campsites or day use sites, closed to camping or closed for restoration sites. Here's our campsite inventory. We were able to piece some of this out so that the overall rating of the campsite would change the color of it. So when you look at it on the map, you get a sense of whether this is a big major campsite that people are going to, and basically based on impact. If it's kind of medium in the orange, or really low use one-timer site in the green, that might be a great one to just do an obliteration at and let wilderness take back hold of that area. So it can really help people focus in on where to go and what to do, especially if they're new and haven't been to that area yet. Some of our bridge information will probably be moved to that trails map too, but all of our bridges, which we have over 80 on the district, will probably be moved into that trails map, and we can do full bridge inventories and inspections and put it right into that feature and have it work real time off of this map. And then you see some of this is background layer, wilderness zones, and so on and so forth. So I'll zoom out here, and even though the newest version isn't done, I'll give you an idea of what's going to happen with this as well. So you can see our darker green is the wilderness area, the lighter green is outside of wilderness. You can see we have some trailheads outside, but that's an aside. Recently, we instituted some new regulations, one of which is an elevational fire ban and some site-specific fire bans. That will be an overlay on the dark green as a different kind of color within a boundary, so you know exactly when you're inside or outside of the fire ban. It's going to look very similar on this map as it's going to look on the maps that are trailhead posters. Some of our special regulation areas that have camping setbacks or other special regulations above and beyond the general wilderness rules and regs are going to show up as another boundary, so you know exactly when you're in that and where you're at in relation to those special regulation areas on some of these maps. And you can see too, we were even able to get some of our kind of technical glacier information on here. So that's just kind of a background layer you can see when you're in the field. So feedback I've gotten from folks on this, rangers testing this out, partners testing this out, is that it does take some time to figure it out. And some of the data, they wish we could collect more in each feature, which we're able to modify in time. But as folks have figured this out and work with this, they really liked it because they can see a lot of what's happening on the ground and get a good sense of where to focus their time and energy and communicate their efforts back to managers or their coworkers or partners without getting too complex and in the weeds about trying to describe it when they get back to the station. Type it in an email or walk over to a map and talk about it and have some of that data be forgotten or lost. Having folks take extra notes. You can do it one time. People can hit the synchronize button and go out in the field and really work with that real time. So far it's worked pretty good. We're getting probably to the point of capacity with how many different types of data that we have that we're collecting and how complex that data is getting. So as best you can, if you decide you do want to do this, keeping it as simple as possible is typically best, but also just thinking about how you would want that to look, how you want that feature to show to folks on the ground or to managers who are thinking about what kind of impacts are happening out there. Really trying to keep it as simple as possible. The more complex it gets, the less likely it is that people who interact with that are going to understand what's going on or how to edit it correctly. So 8:42 on my clock. I'll open it up for questions.
Yeah, go ahead and type your questions in the chat, y'all, and I'll read them out. Okay, so there's a question here. This person's wondering, how many people are you coordinating with in the field? They're going to be using
Yeah.
field maps this summer to collect LAC data. Um, it seems like they say it seems like you are using this tool to communicate information to a lot of different people, looking for ideas about more ways to apply field maps in my area.
Yeah. So all of our field going folks on both forests have access to this, and that's roughly 25 people total in the field using this real-time just agency personnel. And this year we are going to do a test with some of our partners, uh, give them access to some of the maps. And basically we selected a few folks who are going to test it out. Basically, we have a lot of partners that are like leads within a group. Like I said, Salamanders, Friends of Central Cascades, Wilderness, so on and so forth. So some of those leads we'll be testing out and see how the interaction goes. And if that works, we probably start and give it to all the leads of these different groups, and then potentially go broader. But we wanted to start small and start handing it out to other folks. So at the end of the day, we'll probably this year have more like 45 to 50 people using this and synchronizing with this. And I'd say that's quite a few, but it's not unheard of. Fires have quite a bit more than that doing it on fires and making it work. But again, the more people who are doing it, the more folks you got to get on the same page with how to interact with those features correctly. So I'd say start smaller and have some designated folks to start doing it who you know are skookum on how it works, and then go broad. If you start broad and try and rein it back in, you run into issues.
Yeah, that's good advice, Dylan. It seems like really having a good procedure to follow for syncing up is pretty important for this. So another question comes from Andres Osorio. They say that I've been using ArcGIS Online for wilderness character monitoring this season. The UI for the software recently went through a significant change. Within the program, it is calling it the new map viewer. Um, is this a, is this sorry?
Hey, Eric, I'm in the chat. I can read these now, I think.
Yeah.
Let's see. Is this new map viewer, a new app called Field Maps? It's kind of a technical question. So you're using ArcGIS Online. The question I'd ask back is, are you using the desktop version, which still is ArcGIS Online, or the mobile? If you're using the mobile, I'd encourage you to, before you get operations going, have everybody download Field Maps and start using that. It is fully functional. Everything will be transitioning to that. And December is what I heard here in Region 6. I assume it's the same everywhere. But in order to just make it a smoother process, Field Maps essentially operates just like Collector with some updated capabilities. So if you have the ability, I'd say everybody load Field Maps on, sign in with your same accounts, download the offline map, and you should be in the same system and ready to go. I'll jump to the next one, but if that didn't answer it, go ahead and put something else in the chat. Nathan's asking, are you hosting trains at the beginning of the season to make sure everyone is on the same page prior to using the maps? Definitely. So we go over this quite a bit at the beginning of the year and get folks on that same page before we use it also. I'd say bingo on that. If it's your first time implementing it, I just recommend doing more trainings than less until you feel like folks are doing pretty good at it. And trainings include not only, you know, going out in the parking lot and just trying it out, but go into the field where you'll be working and try it out. Go into some steep canyons with steep tree cover, so you can see the difference in the GPS capabilities there versus with open sky and no canopy. You're going to have a harder time getting good accuracy in those steep canyons versus up high and open sky. So you'll just have to play with that a bit and see what works best for you.
Yeah, and Dylan, do you have sort of a training protocols developed where you could share those?
Not really protocol. I mean, the best that we've done is tell people to get the account, like I said, get the app, however you're going to use it, and we basically show up with everybody having gotten the app, had the online account, show up with that. Oops. It looks like our session is going to end here soon. Show up with that all ready to go. And you stand around in a group and say, okay, and then you just walk through how to do each feature data, and then just have people do it real time, ask questions, do it again, ask questions, do it again, ask questions. So that's what I'd say to do, and do it in the field where you're going to actually work. So you know it's going to work there and not in the parking lot by your station.
So
I think it's,
we're basically out of time, y'all. So let me see if there's any more just in the chat. That was helpful. Dylan, thanks for presenting on that. Thanks for the great questions, y'all. See you back in the other room.
yeah, thank you, everybody.